The charcoal smudged across Olivia Wright's thumb as she shaded the horizon, trying desperately to capture the way the Wyoming sun melted into the distant mountains like butter on warm bread. And she had almost convinced herself that being alone out here beyond Evanston's dusty limits was a choice rather than her constant reality. She had positioned herself on a flat boulder overlooking the valley, her sketchbook balanced on her knees, her traveling case of art supplies open beside her. The September evening air carried the scent of sage and dried grass, and somewhere far below, a creek whispered secrets to the willows along its banks. Olivia had been in Evanston for 3 weeks now, having arrived on the Union Pacific Railroad with little more than her art supplies, 2 dresses, and a determination to escape Philadelphia's suffocating expectations. Her father had wanted her to marry Harold Pemberton, a banker twice her age with thin lips and wandering hands. Her mother had pressed and pleaded, reminding Olivia that at 22 she was already approaching spinsterhood. But Olivia had saved every penny from selling her sketches to the local papers, and one morning in July of 1885, she simply left. A note on the breakfast table, a prayer that they would forgive her someday. The sunset was proving difficult. She could capture the shapes well enough, the way the clouds stacked like river stones in the sky, but the light kept changing, growing richer and more golden with each passing moment. Her fingers worked quickly, smudging and shading, adding depth to the mountains that rose like ancient sentinels in the distance. She was so focused on her work that she did not hear the horse approaching until it nickered softly, perhaps 50 feet away. Olivia's head snapped up, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. She was alone out here, a woman by herself in territory where that was foolish at best, dangerous at worst. Her hand instinctively moved toward the small knife she kept in her pocket, though she had never used it for anything more threatening than sharpening pencils. The rider dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He was tall, that much she could see even at this distance, with broad shoulders and the easy stance of someone comfortable in their own skin. He wore dusty chaps over worn denim, a dark shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. As he walked closer, leading his horse by the reins, Olivia could make out more details. Dark hair that needed cutting, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes that seemed to catch the sunset light. "Evening," he said, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. "Did not mean to startle you." Olivia's fingers tightened on her charcoal. "You are on private land." "Actually, this section belongs to the federal government," he replied, a hint of amusement coloring his words. "Open range. I have got as much right to be here as you do." She felt heat rise to her cheeks, annoyed at being corrected and at the way her heart was still racing. "Well then, I suppose we are both trespassing equally." He smiled at that, a genuine expression that softened his weathered features. He could not have been much older than 30, she guessed, though life out here seemed to age people faster than the gentle existence she had known back east. He looped his horse's reins over a low juniper branch, and then, to her surprise, walked over to where she sat. "Mind if I rest here a moment? Been riding since dawn, and my mare could use the break." He gestured to a spot on the boulder a respectful distance from her. Olivia hesitated, every lesson about propriety and proper behavior warring with something else, something that whispered that out here, those old rules meant less than survival and human kindness. "I suppose not." He settled onto the rock with a soft grunt, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, carved there by sun and wind and perhaps laughter. He had a scar along his jaw, thin and pale, and his hands were calloused and strong. Harrison Quinn, he offered, not extending his hand, perhaps sensing she would not take it. Olivia Wright. That is a fine picture you are making there, Miss Wright. He nodded toward her sketchbook. You have got the mountains just right. That little dip between the two peaks, most people miss that. Despite herself, Olivia felt pleased. You know these mountains. Been riding this territory for near about 8 years now. I work cattle mostly, drive them up from Colorado in the spring, bring them back down before the snow flies. He leaned back on his hands, his gaze following the sunset. Never get tired of this view, though. Something about the way the light hits everything out here makes it all seem possible somehow. There was something in his voice, a wistfulness that surprised her. Cowboys were supposed to be rough, simple men, or so she had been told. Yet Harrison Quinn spoke with an eloquence that suggested more than just cattle drives and campfires. What makes it all seem possible? She asked, her charcoal poised above the paper. He considered the question seriously, his eyes on the horizon. Starting over, I suppose, being something other than what folks expect. The West has a way of letting you shed your skin like a snake in summer, come out someone new. Olivia found herself studying his profile, the strong lines of his face, the way the fading light caught in his dark eyes. Almost without thinking, her hand began to move across a blank section of her page, sketching quick, confident lines. The curve of his hat brim, the angle of his shoulders. The way he sat, relaxed but alert, like a man always halfway ready to move. Is that why you are out here? Harrison asked. Shedding your skin, she paused, surprised by his perception. Something like that, running from something or running toward something. Does it matter? I reckon it does. Running from something, you are always looking over your shoulder. Running towards something, you can actually see where you are going. Olivia's hand stilled. She looked at her sketch, at the way she had captured him without even meaning to, and then at the man himself. I had not thought of it that way. What are you running from, if you do not mind my asking? And if you do mind, just tell me to keep my thoughts to myself. I have been told I am too curious for my own good. The sun was sinking lower now, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. In Philadelphia, someone asking such a personal question would have been the height of impropriety. But out here, with the vast Wyoming sky overhead and the mountains watching like patient giants, it felt different. It felt honest. An engagement I did not want, Olivia said quietly. A life that felt like a cage. Parents who loved me but could not understand that I needed something more than tea parties and calling cards. Harrison nodded slowly. And the drawing, that is the more you needed, part of it. I want to capture this. She gestured at the landscape before them. The real West, not the dime novel version. I want to show people back east what it truly looks like, feels like. The space and the light and the possibility you mentioned. That is a fine dream, Harrison said, and there was no mockery in his voice, only respect. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the sun touched the mountaintops and began its final descent. Olivia returned to her original sketch, adding details, deepening shadows. But she found herself acutely aware of Harrison's presence beside her, the quiet way he breathed, the occasional soft sound as he shifted his weight. You are in my sunset now, she said after a time, glancing at him. I started this before you arrived, but now when I look at this scene, you are part of it. Harrison turned to look at her, and something passed between them, quick and electric as summer lightning. Is that a problem? I am not sure yet, Olivia admitted. Her fingers found the edge of the page where she had sketched him. But I drew you anyway. You are here on the edge of the paper, part of the picture now whether I planned it or not. He leaned closer, careful not to invade her space but near enough to see the sketch. His eyes widened slightly. That is remarkable. You made me look almost noble. I am just a cowhand with dirt under his nails." "You are more than that," Olivia said, surprised by her own boldness. "Anyone can see that if they look properly." The sun slipped below the mountains, and the sky ignited in shades of orange, pink, and purple that no artist could truly capture. They sat together, this unlikely pair, and watched the day end. When the colors finally began to fade and the first stars appeared, Harrison stood and retrieved his hat. "I should be getting back to camp. Got 15 men depending on me to make sure this drive goes smooth, and they will be wondering where I have gotten to." He paused, looking down at her. "Will you be out here tomorrow evening?" Olivia's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Perhaps." "Then perhaps I will ride this way again. Make sure the federal government's land is being properly appreciated." The corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile. "Perhaps you should," Olivia replied, allowing herself to smile back. Harrison touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was somehow both casual and courtly, then walked to his mare. He mounted with fluid ease, settling into the saddle like he was born there. "Be careful riding back to town, Miss Wright. Twilight is when the coyotes come out." "I will." "Thank you, Mr. Quinn." She watched him ride away, his silhouette growing smaller against the darkening sky until finally he disappeared over a rise. Only then did Olivia look down at her sketchbook, at the sunset she had tried to capture and at the cowboy who had somehow become part of it. The picture was better for his presence, she realized, more complete, as if the landscape had been waiting for him to arrive before it could truly be whole. The ride back to Evanston took her 20 minutes on her borrowed horse, a gentle mare named Daisy that belonged to the boarding house where Olivia rented a room. She had learned to ride out of necessity, though she still felt uncertain in the saddle, nothing like the easy confidence Harrison had shown. The boarding house sat on the edge of town, a 2-story structure that had been painted yellow once but had faded to something closer to cream. Mrs. Patricia Hoffman, who ran the establishment with brisk efficiency, was waiting on the porch when Olivia arrived. She was a stout woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You are cutting it close, Miss Wright," she called out. "Another 15 minutes, and I would have sent someone looking for you." "I apologize, Mrs. Hoffman. I lost track of time." Olivia dismounted and began unsaddling Daisy, her fingers working the buckles with increasing familiarity. "That drawing of yours will get you in trouble one of these days," Mrs. Hoffman said, though her tone was more concerned than scolding. "A young woman alone out on the range. It is not safe." "I am careful," Olivia assured her, though she knew the older woman was right. She had been lucky so far, but luck could run out. Careful is not always enough. Mrs. Hoffman came down the steps to help with the saddle, hoisting it over the fence rail with practiced ease. Was the sunset worth the risk at least? Olivia thought of Harrison Quinn sitting beside her on that boulder, the way the light had played across his features, the unexpected depth of their conversation. Yes, I think it was. That night, in her small room on the second floor, Olivia lit a lamp and studied her sketches by its flickering light. The sunset was good, perhaps some of her best work. But her eyes kept returning to the quick portrait she had made of Harrison, those confident lines that somehow captured not just his appearance but something of his character. The quiet strength, the thoughtfulness beneath the rough exterior. She knew better than to let herself feel anything. She had come west to be free, to pursue her art, not to entangle herself with the first man who showed her kindness. And yet, as she lay in bed listening to the sounds of Evanston settling in for the night, the distant piano from a saloon, the bark of a dog, the murmur of voices, she found herself hoping that tomorrow evening would come quickly, and that perhaps Harrison Quinn would ride that way again. The next day passed with agonizing slowness. Olivia spent the morning at the general store, which had agreed to display some of her sketches for sale. She had sold 2 so far, small drawings of the town and surrounding landscape, earning enough to pay another week's room and board. The store owner, a taciturn man named George Freely, nodded approvingly at the new pieces she brought. "Folks like these," he said, adjusting his spectacles to peer at a drawing of the train depot. "Makes them feel important seeing their town in a picture like this. Keep them coming and I will keep selling them." In the afternoon, she helped Mrs. Hoffman with the washing, working the heavy wet sheets through the wringer and hanging them to dry in the Wyoming wind. The other boarder, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Carlson who worked as a clerk at the railroad office, sat on the porch reading a newspaper and occasionally commenting on the state of the world. "Says here they are having terrible floods down in Texas," he announced. "Whole towns washed away. Makes you grateful for this dry country, even when you are choking on dust." Finally, as the sun began its western descent, Olivia saddled Daisy once more and headed out toward the boulder. Her heart hammered foolishly in her chest, and she scolded herself for acting like a schoolgirl. He probably would not even come. He had a cattle drive to manage, responsibilities, a life that had nothing to do with her. But when she crested the rise and saw the boulder, her breath caught. Harrison Quinn was already there, sitting on his horse, waiting. He turned at the sound of Daisy's hooves, and even from a distance, she could see him smile. "I was worried you might have meant maybe as in no," he called out as she approached. "I was worried you had meant maybe the same way," Olivia replied, dismounting. Her hands were trembling slightly as she pulled out her sketchbook and supplies. Harrison swung down from his saddle and walked over to the same spot they had shared the previous evening. This time, he sat a little closer, near enough that Olivia could smell horse and leather and sage on him, near enough that she could see the exact color of his eyes, a deep brown with flecks of amber. "I thought about you today," he said simply. "About what you said, wanting to capture the real West. I was wondering what you have seen so far, being new here and all." Olivia arranged her supplies, grateful for something to do with her hands. "The town mostly. The depot, the main street, the people going about their business. I have ridden out here a few times to different vantage points. But that is just the surface," Harrison said. "The West is more than pretty views and wooden buildings. It is the people and their stories. It is the hard parts too, the struggles and the failures along with the successes." "Tell me then," Olivia said, meeting his eyes. "Tell me the stories. Help me understand." And so, as she sketched the sunset for the second evening in a row, Harrison talked. He told her about growing up in Missouri, the second son of a farmer who had lost everything in the war. He spoke of heading west at 17 with nothing but a horse and a stubborn refusal to starve. He described the first cattle drive he had worked, how terrified he had been of making a mistake, of being found wanting. "I had never felt so small," he said, staring out at the mountains. "This land makes you realize how tiny you are, how little you matter in the grand scheme. But somehow that is freeing too. If you are small, your mistakes are small. You can always try again tomorrow." "Is that why you stayed?" Olivia asked, her charcoal moving across the page, capturing the mountains, the sky, and now, more deliberately, the man beside her. "Partly. Also because I fell in love with it. The space, the silence, even the harshness. Back in Missouri, everything felt used up, fought over. Out here, it feels like the world is still being made, like you could be part of that creation if you are brave enough." Olivia paused in her sketching. "You have a poet's soul, Mr. Quinn," he laughed, a rich, warm sound. "My old trail boss would have some choice words about that assessment." But my ma, she loved poetry. Used to read to us boys every night before bed. I guess some of it stuck, even if I spend my days covered in dust and cow dung. Tell me about your family, Olivia said softly. Harrison's expression grew more somber. Ma died when I was 15. Fever took her quick. Pa followed a year later. I think he was heartbroken more than sick. My older brother Jacob got the farm, what was left of it anyway. We are still in touch, letters a few times a year. He married a nice girl from town, has 3 kids now, working hard to make something of that rocky soil. And you never wanted that. A farm, a wife, children. I did once. Was even engaged for about 6 months when I was 25. Girl named Mary from a ranch outside Denver. Pretty as a picture, smart too. But she wanted me to settle, to buy land and build a house and stay put. I tried, I honestly did. Got a job on a ranch, started saving money, but I felt like I was suffocating, like my skin did not fit right anymore. He looked at Olivia with an intensity that made her breath hitch. I broke her heart when I left, and I am not proud of that. She deserved better than a man who could not stay still. What happened to her? She married the banker's son. They have a nice house in Denver proper. I saw them once on a supply run walking down the street together. She looked happy, really happy. I was glad for her. Olivia worked on her sketch, adding Harrison more fully this time, not just at the edge but properly part of the composition. Do you regret it, leaving her? Harrison considered the question carefully. I regret hurting her, but I do not regret the choice. It would have been worse to stay and slowly turn bitter, resenting her for wanting what I could not give. She found someone who could give her that life. That is how it should be. And what do you want, Harrison Quinn? Olivia asked, surprised by her own boldness in using his first name. He turned to look at her fully, and the sunset light caught in his eyes, turning them almost golden. I am still figuring that out. What about you, Olivia Wright? You ran from one life. What are you running toward? She set down her charcoal, looking at the drawing taking shape before her. Freedom, I suppose. The ability to make my own choices, to create something meaningful. I want my art to matter, to show people something true and beautiful. I want to matter. You do matter, Harrison said quietly. Anyone with eyes can see that. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Olivia's heart was racing again, and she could not blame the altitude or the evening chill. This was something else entirely, something both terrifying and exhilarating. I should not be here, she said, though she made no move to leave. Meeting you like this alone, it is improper. Yes, it is, Harrison agreed, but you are here anyway. I am here anyway, she echoed. They watched the sun set together again, closer than yesterday, the space between them charged with possibility. When the light began to fade, Harrison stood reluctantly. I want to show you something tomorrow, he said, if you are willing. A place a few miles from here where you can see the whole valley spread out like a map. The real West you were talking about, but it would mean riding out further, being gone longer. Olivia knew she should say no. Every rule she had been raised with screamed against the idea. But she looked at Harrison, at his honest face and the hope in his eyes, and found herself nodding. What time should I meet you? 3 o'clock, here at the boulder. We will have plenty of time before sunset, and I will have you back to town well before dark. You have my word on that. Your word means something, Olivia asked, half teasing. It is about the only thing I have got that does, Harrison replied seriously. I will keep you safe, Olivia. I promise you that. She believed him. Perhaps foolishly, perhaps naively, but she believed him. Then I will be here at 3 o'clock. That night, Mrs. Hoffman commented on Olivia's distracted state at dinner. Your head is in the clouds this evening, Miss Wright. That sunset must have been something special. It was, Olivia replied, pushing potatoes around her plate. Very special indeed. The next day crawled by even more slowly than the previous one. Olivia tried to focus on her work, sketching some of the townspeople who agreed to pose for small portraits, but her mind kept wandering to the afternoon ahead. She changed her dress 3 times before finally settling on the sturdy brown one that was practical for riding. She braided her long auburn hair and pinned it up securely under her hat. At precisely 3 o'clock, she arrived at the boulder to find Harrison waiting with 2 horses, his mare and a sturdy gelding. "I borrowed Charlie here from a friend," Harrison explained, gesturing to the gelding. "He is gentle and sure-footed. Thought he might be easier for the trail we are taking than your mare." Olivia appreciated the thoughtfulness even as she felt a flutter of nervousness. "How far are we going exactly?" "About 5 miles northwest. There is a ridge that overlooks the valley. I found it a few years back, and I have been wanting to share it with someone who would appreciate it proper." He helped her mount, his hands firm and respectful, then swung up onto his own horse. "Ready, ready." They rode out across the open range, following trails that Olivia would never have noticed on her own. Harrison pointed out landmarks, teaching her to read the land the way he did. A lightning-struck tree that marked a good water source nearby. A particular rock formation that meant they were heading northwest. The way the grass grew differently in low spots where moisture collected. "You have to pay attention out here," he explained. "Everything tells you something if you know how to listen. The wind, the animals, the plants. It all means something." "How did you learn all this?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious. "Old trail boss named Samuel Garrett. He took me under his wing on my first drive, taught me everything. Said I had good instincts but no knowledge, and instincts without knowledge will get you killed quick." Harrison's voice was warm with affection. "He died 3 years back. Heart gave out on him one night around the campfire, just closed his eyes and did not open them again. I think he would have wanted it that way, out under the stars doing what he loved." "You loved him," Olivia observed. "Like a father. More than my own father in some ways, though I feel guilty saying that. Sam understood me in a way my pa never could." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the horses setting an easy pace. Olivia found herself relaxing into the rhythm, her body learning to move with the animal beneath her. The afternoon sun was warm on her shoulders, and the sky stretched endless and blue above them. She understood in that moment what Harrison had meant about the land making you feel both small and free at the same time. When they finally reached the ridge, Olivia's breath caught. The valley spread out below them like a painting, the town of Evanston small in the distance, the railroad tracks silver ribbons cutting through the landscape. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks still holding last winter's snow. A river wound through the valley floor, and she could see the dark shapes of cattle dotting the grassland. "Oh," she breathed. "Harrison, this is magnificent." He was watching her face rather than the view, and when she turned to look at him, the expression in his eyes made her heart skip. "I knew you would see it," he said softly. "Most people would just think it is empty land, but you see what it really is." "What is it really?" Olivia asked, though she thought she knew. "Possibility, beauty, home." Harrison dismounted and came to help her down. His hand spanned her waist as he lifted her from the saddle, and when her feet touched the ground, he did not immediately let go. They stood there, close enough that Olivia could see the individual whiskers on his jaw, close enough to feel the heat of him. "I should not feel this way," she whispered. "I have known you 3 days. I know." His voice was rough. "But I cannot help it. The moment I saw you sitting on that boulder with your sketchbook, something just shifted inside me, like I had been waiting for you without knowing it." "Harrison, you do not have to say anything. I know it is too soon. I know I am just a cowboy with nothing to offer you but a bedroll and a saddle, but I need you to know that this matters. You matter." Olivia reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling slightly. "You are not just anything. You are extraordinary, and I feel it too, this impossible, illogical thing." He turned his head slightly, pressing his lips to her palm in a kiss that was both gentle and searing. "What do we do about it? I do not know, but right now I want to draw this view. And I want you in it again, properly this time. Will you sit with me?" They settled on the ridge, and Olivia pulled out her sketchbook. For the next 2 hours, she drew with a focus and passion she had never experienced before. She captured the valley, the mountains, the endless sky. And she captured Harrison, sitting beside her, his profile strong against the horizon, his body relaxed but alert. She drew him like she was trying to memorize him with her pencil to hold on to this moment forever. Harrison talked while she worked, telling her more stories. About the time a flash flood nearly swept away their whole herd. About finding a lost child wandering the range and reuniting her with her frantic parents. About nights around the campfire, the men singing old songs and telling lies about their prowess and adventures. "You would like the men on my crew," he said. "They are a rough bunch but good-hearted. Miguel, he is from Texas, makes the best trail coffee you ever tasted. And Chuck, he is older, must be near 60, but he can still outride most of the younger men. Then there is Tommy, just 19, on his first big drive. Reminds me of myself at that age, all eager and terrified at once." "Do they know about me?" Olivia asked. Harrison shook his head. "Not yet. I was not sure there was anything to tell, but now." He trailed off, looking at her with such open longing that Olivia had to look away before she did something foolish like throw herself into his arms. "Now," she prompted. "Now I am hoping there might be something to tell, eventually, if you want that." Olivia set down her pencil and turned to face him fully. "Harrison, I came west to be free. I left behind my family, everything I knew, because I could not stand the idea of being someone's wife, someone's property. I wanted to belong to myself." "I understand," Harrison said, though his expression had shuddered slightly, preparing for rejection. "Let me finish," Olivia said gently. "I did not want to be property. But sitting here with you, talking with you these past 3 days, it does not feel like that. It feels like partnership. Like you see me as a whole person, not just a pretty face or a way to advance socially. Do you understand what I am trying to say?" Hope flickered back into Harrison's eyes. "I think so, but tell me plain so there is no confusion. I want to know you better. I want to see where this impossible thing leads, but I need to keep being myself. Keep drawing, keep working. I cannot go back to being decorative and useless." "You could never be useless," Harrison said firmly. "And I would never ask you to stop creating. Your art, it is part of who you are. I could not love you without loving that too." He stopped, his eyes widening slightly at his own words. "Love." Olivia's voice was barely a whisper. "Too soon to say it, I know. But yes, I think so. I think I am falling in love with you, Olivia Wright, impossible as that seems." The world seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere below, a hawk cried out. The wind whispered through the grass, and Olivia made a choice. "Then fall," she said. "I will catch you, because I think I am falling too." Harrison reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, his hand cupped her cheek with such tenderness that tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. He leaned in gradually, his intention clear, and she met him halfway. Their lips touched softly at first, a question and an answer. Then deeper, more certain, a promise being made without words. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, the sun had moved noticeably across the sky. Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "We should head back before I forget to be a gentleman," he said ruefully. "What if I do not want you to be a gentleman?" Olivia surprised herself by saying. Harrison groaned. "Do not tempt me, I want to do this right. Court you properly such as I can. You deserve that." Olivia laughed, feeling giddy and young and alive in a way she never had before. "Court me then, Harrison Quinn, but know that I am not a patient woman." "Noted," he said, grinning. He helped her pack up her art supplies and they mounted their horses. The ride back seemed both too long and too short. They talked and laughed, comfortable with each other in a way that should have taken months to develop, but somehow felt natural after just 3 days. As they neared the boulder where they had first met, Harrison pulled up his horse. "The drive moves on in 3 days. We have been grazing the herd here while they put on weight, but the contract says we need to deliver to the stockyards in Rawlins by the end of the month. It is about a week's journey." Olivia's heart sank. "So you are leaving?" "For about 2 weeks total, but then I will be back through Evanston on my way to winter camp. We keep a base camp about 20 miles south of here during the cold months, smaller crew, just enough men to watch over the breeding stock." He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "I will come back, Olivia. I promise you that. And I will write if I can find someone heading this direction to carry letters." "I will wait," Olivia said, squeezing his fingers. "And I will keep drawing. Maybe I will have a whole portfolio to show you when you return." They reached the edge of town as the sun set, painting the sky in those same spectacular colors that had brought them together. Harrison insisted on riding with her all the way to the boarding house, propriety be damned. Mrs. Hoffman was on the porch again, and her eyebrows rose sharply at the sight of Olivia arriving with a strange man. Harrison dismounted and helped Olivia down, then turned to face Mrs. Hoffman. "Evening, madam. I am Harrison Quinn. I wanted to make sure Miss Wright returned safely." Mrs. Hoffman looked him up and down with sharp eyes. "That was thoughtful of you, Mr. Quinn, though I wonder where exactly she was that she needed such careful escorting." "I was showing her a view for her artwork," Harrison said calmly. "She is very talented. Have you seen her drawings?" "I have," Mrs. Hoffman said, her expression softening slightly. "She is talented indeed. And you are a cattleman, madam. I run a crew for the Diamond Creek Cattle Company. We have been grazing near here, but we are moving out in a few days." "I see," Mrs. Hoffman looked between them, and Olivia could see the older woman's mind working. "Well, Mr. Quinn, I appreciate you ensuring Miss Wright's safety. These are rough lands for a young woman alone." "Yes, madam, they are, which is why I hope you will keep a close eye on her while I am gone. She is precious cargo." Despite everything, Olivia felt herself blushing. "Harrison," he grinned at her, unrepentant, then touched his hat brim to both women. "Ladies, I bid you good evening. Miss Wright, I will see you tomorrow at the boulder. I still have 3 days before we move out." "Yes," Olivia said, not caring what Mrs. Hoffman thought. "Tomorrow at 3 again." "Tomorrow at 3, Harrison confirmed. He mounted his horse and rode away, looking back once to wave. Mrs. Hoffman waited until he was out of earshot before turning to Olivia. "That is a good man, or I am no judge of character, but be careful, Miss Wright. Cowboys are not known for staying put." "He is different," Olivia said. "They all are until they are not. I do not say this to hurt you, just to protect you. I was young once too. I know how easy it is to mistake loneliness for love, especially out here where company is scarce." But Olivia shook her head. "This is not loneliness, Mrs. Hoffman. This is real. I know it seems fast, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Mrs. Hoffman sighed. "Then I hope you are right, child. I truly do. Now come inside. Your dinner is getting cold." The next 3 days passed in a blur of happiness. Harrison came every afternoon and they rode out to different vantage points, sometimes to the ridge, sometimes to new places he wanted to show her. Olivia filled her sketchbook with drawings of the landscape, the cattle, the endless sky, and always, somewhere in the composition, Harrison. He was becoming part of her art the way he was becoming part of her life, essential and irreplaceable. On the last evening before the drive moved out, they sat on their boulder watching the sun set one more time. Olivia had finished a large drawing that captured this exact view, with Harrison sitting beside her, and she carefully tore it from her sketchbook. "I want you to have this," she said, offering it to him. "So you remember." Harrison took the drawing carefully, his eyes scanning every detail. "As if I could forget." "Olivia, he stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. "I want you to have this. It is not much, but it was my mother's." He opened his palm to reveal a simple silver ring with a small turquoise stone. The metal was slightly tarnished, the stone modest, but it was clearly well loved. "Harrison, I cannot take your mother's ring," Olivia protested. "It is not an engagement ring," Harrison said quickly. "Not yet anyway. I know it is too soon for that, and I know you need time. But I want you to have something of mine while I am gone, a promise that I am coming back, that this is real." Olivia took the ring with trembling fingers. It fit perfectly on her right hand, the turquoise catching the sunset light. "It is beautiful." "She would have liked you," Harrison said softly. "Ma always said I needed someone with fire in them to match my restlessness, someone who would not try to cage me but would run alongside me instead." "I will wear it every day," Olivia promised. "And I will be here when you return." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the mountains, holding each other close, trying to memorize the feel of it to last through the lonely days ahead. When they finally pulled apart, full darkness had fallen and the stars were emerging in the vast Wyoming sky. "I should let you get back," Harrison said reluctantly. "Early start tomorrow. We are moving out at dawn." The ride back to town was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. At the boarding house, Harrison dismounted and helped Olivia down one last time. He held her for a long moment, his arms tight around her. "2 weeks," he said into her hair. "I will be back in 2 weeks or less if I can manage it." "I will count every day," Olivia whispered. She stood on the porch and watched him ride away, her hand clutching the ring he had given her. Mrs. Hoffman came out and put an arm around her shoulders, saying nothing, just offering comfort. They stood there together until Harrison disappeared into the darkness, and even then, Olivia could not quite make herself go inside. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest of Olivia's life. She threw herself into her work, creating drawing after drawing. She sketched the railroad workers, the shopkeepers, the Chinese laborers who worked on maintaining the tracks. She captured children playing in the dusty streets and old-timers sitting on porches. She drew the mountains from every angle, in every light, trying to see them the way Harrison did. She sold several pieces to the general store, and even got a commission from the railroad office to create a series of drawings showing Evanston and the surrounding territory. The money was good, better than she had hoped for, and for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Olivia felt financially secure. But every evening she rode out to the boulder alone and watched the sunset by herself. She touched the ring on her finger and imagined Harrison somewhere out there, driving cattle through mountain passes, sleeping under the stars. She wondered if he was thinking of her too, if he was counting the days the way she was. On the 13th day, as she sat on the boulder sketching the familiar view, she heard a horse approaching. Her heart leaped, but it was not Harrison. Instead, a young man of about 19 rode up, his hat dusty and his face sunburned. "Excuse me, madam," he called out. "Are you Miss Olivia Wright?" "I am," she confirmed, her heart pounding. Please let him be all right, she thought. Please. "I am Tommy Fletcher from Mr. Quinn's crew. He asked me to ride ahead with a message." The young man pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. We ran into some trouble with raiders trying to steal cattle. No one was hurt serious, but it slowed us down. Mr. Quinn said to tell you it will be another 4 or 5 days before he can return to Evanston. Olivia took the letter with trembling fingers. Thank you for riding out of your way to tell me. Tommy grinned. It was not out of my way, madam. Mr. Quinn was very specific about making sure you got that letter. He has been like a bear with a sore paw, worried you might think he forgot about you or something. Despite her disappointment at the delay, Olivia smiled. Tell him I understand. Tell him I am waiting. Yes, madam, I will tell him. Tommy touched his hat and rode off, leaving Olivia alone with her letter. She waited until she was back in her room at the boarding house before she opened it. Harrison's handwriting was surprisingly neat, the letters carefully formed as if he had taken great care with each word. Dearest Olivia, it began. I am writing this by firelight with the sounds of the herd settling in for the night all around me. I wish you could see this sight, the way the stars fill up the whole sky out here, so thick you could scoop them up by the handful. But they are not as bright as your eyes, not even close. We ran into trouble today. About 15 raiders tried to stampede the herd and pick off strays in the confusion. We managed to drive them off without anyone getting badly hurt, though Chuck took a bullet grazed to his arm and Miguel's horse threw a shoe in the chase. But we did not lose a single head of cattle, which is what matters for the contract. The problem is that it put us behind schedule and spooked the herd bad. They are skittish now, jumping at every shadow. It will take us a few extra days to get them settled and moving smooth again. I am sending Tommy ahead to let you know, because I could not stand the thought of you waiting at that boulder and thinking I did not come. I am coming, Olivia. If I have to drive these cattle straight through without sleeping, I am coming back to you. I have your drawing folded up in my saddlebag and I look at it every night before I sleep. The men are starting to tease me about it, but I do not care. They can tease all they want. That picture reminds me that this is not a dream, that you are real and waiting for me. I know I said I was falling in love with you. I need you to know that I have fallen completely. I love you, Olivia Wright. I love your passion for your art, your courage in leaving everything you knew to chase your dreams. I love the way you see the world, finding beauty in things other people overlook. I love your laugh and your fierce independence, and the way you are not afraid to speak your mind. When I get back, I am going to court you properly, like I said. But I am also going to ask you to marry me, so you might as well be prepared. I know it is fast. I know people will think we are crazy. But out here, life is uncertain. You learn not to waste time when you find something real. Wait for me. I am coming home. All my love, Harrison. Olivia read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write her own reply, knowing that Tommy would carry it back when he rejoined the drive. My dearest Harrison, she wrote, I love you too. Come home safe. I will be waiting. Always, Olivia. 5 days later, just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, Olivia was sitting on the boulder when she saw riders approaching. Her heart recognized him before her eyes confirmed it. Harrison was riding hard, his horse at a gallop, and even from a distance she could see his urgency. She was on her feet and running before she consciously decided to move. They met in the open ground below the boulder, Harrison practically throwing himself from the saddle. He caught her up in his arms, lifting her off her feet, and kissed her like a man who had been drowning and finally found air. I missed you, he said between kisses. God, I missed you so much. I missed you too, Olivia gasped. Harrison, I love you so much it terrifies me. He set her down but kept his arms around her as if he could not bear to let go. I know I said I would court you proper. I know I said I would take my time. But Olivia, I cannot wait. These past weeks without you, I felt like I was missing part of myself. Marry me, please. I do not have much to offer, but I will spend every day of my life making you happy. I will support your art, encourage your dreams. We can build a life together that is ours, that does not follow anyone's rules but our own. Marry me. Olivia was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Harrison let out a whoop that probably scared every animal within a mile, then picked her up and spun her around. When he set her down again, he was grinning like a boy. I was terrified you would say it was too soon, that I was being reckless. You are being reckless, Olivia said, cupping his face in her hands. We both are, but I do not care, you are right. Life is too uncertain to waste time. I want to marry you, Harrison Quinn. I want to build that life with you. They sat on the boulder together, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. Harrison explained that his winter camp was a small cabin about 20 miles south, nestled in a valley with good shelter from the storms. It is rough, he warned. One room, a fireplace, not much else. But it is solid and it is private. I was thinking we could make it a home. Add on another room maybe for your studio. We could get married here in Evanston, then head to the camp. I have to be there by mid-October anyway to prepare for winter. What do you think? I think it sounds perfect, Olivia said. But Harrison, what about my work? I have been selling my drawings here in town. I cannot just abandon that. You would not have to. We are only about a 4-hour ride from Evanston. You could bring your work in once a week, pick up new commissions. And in the spring, when the cattle drives start up again, you could come with us if you wanted. Think of all the drawings you could make on the trail. The real West, remember? You would be living it. Olivia's mind was racing with possibilities. She could document the cattle drives, the life of the cowboys, the changing seasons in the mountains. It was exactly what she had dreamed of when she left Philadelphia, only better because she would have Harrison beside her. When? She asked. When should we get married? As soon as the preacher can manage it. Tomorrow, if possible. Is that too fast? Olivia thought of her parents back in Philadelphia, of the big society wedding her mother had always planned. Then she thought of Harrison's rough hands holding hers gently, of the way he saw her as a whole person rather than a decoration, of the life they could build together in this wild, beautiful country. Tomorrow is perfect, she said. They rode back to town together, this time making no effort to hide their relationship. Harrison came right up to the boarding house porch with her, and when Mrs. Hoffman appeared, he addressed her directly. Madam, I would like your permission to marry Miss Wright. I know I should have asked sooner, should have courted her proper, but I love her and she loves me and we do not want to wait. I promise I will take good care of her. Mrs. Hoffman looked between them at their joined hands and radiant faces, and her stern expression softened into something almost tender. You do not need my permission, Mr. Quinn. Miss Wright is her own woman, and that is clearly why you love her. But you have my blessing anyway for what it is worth. It is worth a great deal, Harrison said sincerely. Thank you, madam. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind. The preacher agreed to perform the ceremony the following afternoon. Mrs. Hoffman insisted on helping Olivia prepare, pressing her own wedding dress on the younger woman. It is too big for you, but we can pin it, the older woman said, her eyes suspiciously bright. Every bride should have a proper dress. Olivia stood in her small room while Mrs. Hoffman adjusted the white dress, pinning and tucking until it fit reasonably well. Looking at herself in the small mirror, Olivia thought of her mother and felt a pang of guilt. I should write to them, she said quietly. My parents, let them know what I am doing. You should, Mrs. Hoffman agreed. But do it after, when it is already done. They will try to talk you out of it otherwise, and you will spend your wedding day feeling guilty instead of happy." It was wise advice. Olivia composed a letter in her mind, planning to send it after the ceremony. Harrison spent the day making arrangements. He rented a room at the hotel for their wedding night, paid in advance for a month's worth of supplies to stock the winter cabin, and bought a wagon to carry everything. His crew had already moved on toward winter quarters, leaving him to catch up after the wedding. The ceremony took place in the small church at the edge of Evanston, with Mrs. Hoffman, Mr. Carlson, and a handful of townspeople in attendance. Harrison wore his best shirt, freshly washed and pressed, his hair still damp from a bath. When Olivia walked down the short aisle, his face transformed with such love and awe that several of the women in attendance had to dab at their eyes. The preacher kept it simple. They exchanged vows, their voices steady and sure. Harrison slid his mother's ring onto Olivia's left hand, where it joined the simple gold band he had bought the day before. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her thoroughly, to the laughter and applause of their small audience. "I love you, Mrs. Quinn," he whispered against her lips. "I love you, Mr. Quinn," she replied, still amazed that it was real, that this wonderful, impossible thing had actually happened. They had a simple meal at the hotel restaurant, with Mrs. Hoffman insisting on paying for it as a wedding gift. As the sun set, painting the sky in those familiar colors, Harrison took Olivia's hand and led her upstairs to their room. Olivia had been nervous all day about this moment, but when Harrison closed the door behind them and pulled her gently into his arms, the nervousness faded. He kissed her slowly, tenderly, his hands careful as they began to unfasten her dress. "We can wait if you need to," he murmured. "There is no rush." But Olivia shook her head. "I do not want to wait. I want this. I want you." He undressed her slowly, reverently, kissing each new bit of skin revealed. When she stood before him in just her chemise, trembling slightly in the lamplight, he looked at her like she was something precious and rare. "You are so beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Olivia reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers fumbling slightly. "So are you." They came together in the bed with a mixture of passion and tenderness, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure. Harrison was patient and gentle, making sure Olivia was ready before finally joining with her fully. The brief pain was quickly forgotten in the overwhelming sensation of being so completely connected to another person, of truly becoming one with the man she loved. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Harrison's arms wrapped around Olivia as she rested her head on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and felt completely at peace for the first time in her life. "I cannot believe you are really mine," Harrison said softly, his fingers trailing through her hair. "I am not yours," Olivia corrected gently. "I belong to myself, but I choose you every day. That is better than belonging. You are right, that is better." He kissed the top of her head. "I choose you too, Olivia Quinn, every single day." They spent 2 more days in Evanston, preparing for the journey to winter camp. Olivia sold several more drawings and arranged with the general store owner to hold any new commissions until she could return. She sent her letter to her parents, carefully explaining her choice and hoping they would eventually understand. On the morning of the 3rd day, they loaded the wagon with supplies and began the journey south. The ride took most of the day, following trails that wound through rocky country and open grassland. Harrison pointed out landmarks and told stories, keeping Olivia entertained and helping her forget her nervousness about seeing their new home. When they finally crested a rise and looked down into the valley, Olivia caught her breath. The cabin sat at the base of a protective hillside, with a creek running nearby and trees providing shelter from the wind. It was small, just as Harrison had warned, but it looked sturdy and welcoming with smoke already rising from the chimney. Miguel and Chuck came ahead to get things ready, Harrison explained. They will stay a few more days to help us get settled, then head to their own winter places. Miguel proved to be a stocky man in his 40s with a quick smile and kind eyes. Chuck was indeed older, his face weathered but his handshake strong. Both men congratulated the newlyweds with genuine warmth, though Miguel could not resist some good-natured teasing about Harrison finally getting caught. "We all thought he would be a bachelor forever," Miguel joked. "Too restless to settle. Shows what we know." The cabin was indeed one room, but it was larger than Olivia had expected, perhaps 20 feet square. The fireplace took up most of one wall, with a cookstove beside it. There was a bed in one corner, a rough table with 4 chairs, and shelves along the walls for storage. Windows on 3 sides let in good light, and someone had made an effort to sweep and clean the place. Over the next few days, Harrison and his men worked to make the cabin more comfortable. They built a lean-to addition on the north side that would serve as Olivia's studio, with good light from a large window. They stacked firewood until they had enough to last through the worst of winter. They stocked the creek with fish traps and set snares for rabbits and other small game. Olivia organized their supplies and began to make the cabin feel like a home. She hung her drawings on the walls, arranged her art supplies in the new studio space, and cooked meals for the men who were working so hard. She had never done much cooking before, but Miguel patiently taught her the basics of making bread, stew, and beans. "It is not fancy," he admitted, "but it will keep you alive and it tastes good enough after a long day's work." When Miguel and Chuck finally rode out, heading to their own winter quarters, Harrison and Olivia stood in front of the cabin and waved until the men disappeared from sight. Then they were truly alone, just the two of them and the vast Wyoming wilderness. "Are you scared?" Harrison asked, pulling Olivia close. "A little," she admitted. "It is so isolated out here, but excited too. This is what I wanted, Harrison, a real life, not a decorative one." That first winter tested them in ways neither had anticipated. The snows came early and heavy, sometimes trapping them in the cabin for days at a time. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the bucket overnight despite the fire. The wind howled around the cabin walls, finding every tiny crack and gap, but there were beautiful moments too. Mornings when they woke to find the world transformed into a pristine white wonderland. Evenings spent by the fire, Harrison reading aloud from one of the few books they owned while Olivia sketched or worked on her drawings. Nights tangled together in their bed, keeping each other warm and loved. Olivia learned to cook properly, to mend clothes, to manage their supplies so they would last until spring. Harrison taught her to shoot, insisting she needed to know how to protect herself if anything ever happened to him. She turned out to be a good shot, better than he expected, and he teased her about maybe hiring her on as a ranch hand. "You could ride out with us next spring," he said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Not the whole drive necessarily, but parts of it. You could sketch the men working, the landscape, all of it. Make a real record of cowboy life." "I would love that," Olivia said, imagining the possibilities. "Do you think the men would mind having a woman along, my men? They would be on their best behavior if I know them. Miguel would probably adopt you like a daughter and try to feed you constantly. Chuck would tell you all his old stories. Tommy would blush every time you looked at him. It would be perfect." In December, a fierce blizzard trapped them in the cabin for nearly a week. Supplies ran low, and Harrison was forced to dig his way through chest-high snow to check the traps and make sure the horses in the small barn were all right. Olivia worked by lamplight in her studio, creating a series of drawings showing winter in the mountains, the harsh beauty of survival. It was during that long week that Olivia first suspected she might be pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses, and her breasts were tender and swollen. She said nothing to Harrison at first, wanting to be sure. But as the days passed and other signs appeared, the queasy stomach in the mornings, the unusual fatigue, she became certain. When she finally told him, on Christmas Eve as they sat by the fire, Harrison's face went through a series of expressions so quickly that Olivia almost laughed. Shock, joy, terror, and then fierce protectiveness all flashed across his features. "A baby," he said, his voice strangled. "Olivia, are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor. All the signs are there." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a child, Harrison." He pulled her into his arms so tightly she almost could not breathe. "I am going to be a father." "I cannot believe it. We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Olivia asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy, Olivia, I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful I can barely stand it. A baby, our baby." He pulled back to look at her seriously. "But this changes things. You need a doctor." "We should go back to Evanston, at least for the birth." "Not yet," Olivia said. "The baby will not come until summer. We have months yet. But yes, when the time gets closer, we can go to town. I would not want to give birth out here with no help." That Christmas was simple but perfect. They had no fancy gifts, just small things they had made for each other. Harrison had carved her a box to hold her art supplies, decorating it with surprising delicacy. Olivia had drawn him a series of pictures showing their life together, from that first sunset on the boulder to their current home in the valley. He looked at each one with wonder, touching the images like he could not quite believe they were real. "You have captured it," he said softly. "Our whole story. This is the best gift anyone has ever given me." As winter deepened and then slowly began to release its grip, Olivia's pregnancy progressed. She felt the first flutters of movement in February, like butterflies trapped beneath her skin. Harrison was endlessly fascinated, his hand constantly finding her growing belly, talking to the baby in a soft voice that made Olivia's heart melt. "I am going to teach you to ride," he told her stomach, "and to rope cattle, and to read the stars for direction. Your mama will teach you to draw and to see beauty in everything. You are going to be so loved, little one. So incredibly loved." In March, as the snow began to melt and the first brave flowers pushed through the cold earth, a rider appeared at their cabin. It was Tommy, now looking a year older and wiser, with news from the company. "Mr. Quinn, sir, they want to know if you will boss the spring drive again. Same route as last year, Colorado to Cheyenne and back. 3 months of work at good pay." He glanced at Olivia, taking in her obvious pregnancy, and his eyes widened. Harrison looked torn. "I do not know, Tommy. My wife is expecting. I hate to leave her alone for 3 months, but Olivia shook her head. "Harrison, we need the money, especially now with a baby coming. I will be fine. I can go stay with Mrs. Hoffman in Evanston. You said the baby is not due until July, so you will be back in plenty of time." "Are you sure?" Harrison looked anguished at the thought of leaving her. "I am sure. You cannot stop living your life because I am pregnant. And honestly, I could use the time in town. I have been meaning to work on a series of drawings to sell." The general store owner mentioned that a newspaper in Cheyenne might be interested in publishing them. After much discussion, they agreed to the plan. Olivia would move back to the boarding house in early April, and Harrison would leave for the drive shortly after. He would write whenever possible and would be back by the end of June, giving them several weeks before the baby arrived. The parting was difficult. Harrison held Olivia for a long time the morning he left, his hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. "Take care of each other," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you both so much." "We love you too," Olivia said, fighting back tears. "Come back safe, we will be waiting." She watched him ride away with his crew, 20 men and several hundred head of cattle, until they disappeared over the horizon. Then she turned and went inside to pack her own things for the move to town. Mrs. Hoffman welcomed Olivia back with open arms, fussing over her pregnancy and insisting she eat more. "You are too thin," the older woman scolded. "Growing a baby takes strength. You need good food and plenty of rest." Olivia settled back into town life, grateful for the company of other women. Mrs. Hoffman proved to be a wealth of information about pregnancy and childbirth, having had 4 children of her own, though only 2 had survived to adulthood. The stories were sometimes frightening, but Olivia appreciated the honesty. She worked on her art series, creating detailed drawings of cowboy life as Harrison had described it to her. She drew cattle drives and campfires, men working in harsh conditions, the endless sky overhead. When she took the completed series to the general store, Mr. Freely was impressed. "These are something special, Mrs. Quinn. Real life, you know, not romanticized like those dime novels. I think that newspaper in Cheyenne will snap these up." He was right. The newspaper not only bought the series but asked for more. They wanted Olivia to become a regular contributor, providing illustrations of Western life. The pay was generous, more than enough to help with the costs of the baby and to save toward their future. Letters from Harrison arrived sporadically, carried by various travelers heading toward Evanston. Each one was filled with love and concern for her health, along with stories of the drive. There had been a stampede near Denver that took them 3 days to recover from. One of the men had been thrown from his horse and broken his arm. Miguel's cooking was giving everyone indigestion. Harrison missed her desperately and counted the days until he could return. Olivia wrote back whenever she could, telling him about the baby's movements, about her successful sale to the newspaper, about how much she loved and missed him. She sent drawings tucked into the letters, little sketches of her daily life and always a self-portrait, so he could see how she looked with her growing belly. In late May, as Olivia was walking back from the general store, she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen that stopped her in her tracks. It passed after a moment, but it scared her. The baby was not due for 2 more months. She went straight to see Dr. Martin, the town physician who had agreed to help with the birth. He examined her carefully, his weathered face serious. "Everything seems fine, Mrs. Quinn. But you need to take it easier. No more long walks into town. Stay at the boarding house and rest. Sometimes babies come early if the mother is too active." Olivia followed his instructions, spending the next weeks in relative idleness that drove her crazy. She could sketch and draw, but the forced inactivity chafed. She wanted to be moving, doing, working. But she also wanted her baby to be healthy, so she endured. June came, and with it, more letters from Harrison. The drive was nearly complete. They would be in Cheyenne by mid-month. Then it was just a matter of getting paid and releasing the men. He would be home by June 25th at the latest. He was so excited to meet their baby, had so many plans for their future. But on June 20th, Olivia went into labor. It started with a dull ache in her back that gradually intensified, moving around to her front. When her water broke, soaking her dress, Mrs. Hoffman sent someone running for the doctor. "It is too early," Olivia gasped between contractions. "The baby is not supposed to come yet." "Harrison is not here. Babies come when they want to, not when it is convenient," Mrs. Hoffman said firmly, helping Olivia into bed. "We will manage. Dr. Martin knows what he is doing." The labor was long and difficult. Olivia had not understood how much it would hurt, how exhausting it would be. She cried for Harrison, needing him there, angry that he was absent for this most important moment. But there was no help for it. He was hundreds of miles away, unaware that his child was being born. After 18 hours of labor, as dawn broke on June 21st, 1886, Olivia gave birth to a son. He was small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and powerful lungs that announced his arrival to the whole boarding house. Dr. Martin wrapped him in a blanket and placed him in Olivia's arms. "He is early but strong," the doctor said. "Keep him warm and fed and he should thrive." Olivia looked down at her son's tiny face and felt love crash over her like a wave. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with Harrison's dark eyes and her stubborn chin. She traced one finger over his soft cheek and watched his mouth purse, searching for food. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mother. Your father is going to be so upset he missed this, but he will be here soon, I promise. Mrs. Hoffman helped her learn to nurse, to change the baby, to swaddle him properly. The other boarders took turns visiting, bringing gifts and advice. Olivia named him Henry after Harrison, though she planned to call him Hank to avoid confusion. 5 days after Hank's birth, as Olivia sat in the rocking chair by the window nursing him, she saw a dust cloud approaching from the south. Her heart leaped. It was too small to be a cattle drive, just a single rider pushing his horse hard. As the figure got closer, she recognized Harrison's form. "He is here," she told the baby. "Your father is here." She met him at the door, still wearing her nightgown, the baby in her arms. Harrison took the porch steps in 2 bounds, his face showing shock and joy and a dozen other emotions. "Olivia, I saw your light and came straight here instead of the hotel. I thought I had another 3 weeks before." He stopped, staring at the bundle in her arms. "Is that your son?" Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "He came early. I am sorry you missed it. I wanted you here so badly." Harrison's hands were shaking as he reached out to touch the baby's head. "A son, we have a son. Meet Henry Quinn, though I am going to call him Hank." She shifted the baby, offering him to Harrison. "Do you want to hold him?" Harrison took the infant with extreme care as if he might break. Hank was so tiny in his father's large, calloused hands. Harrison stared down at his son with such wonder and love that Olivia started crying again. "He is perfect," Harrison whispered. "Absolutely perfect. Hello, Hank. I am your father, and I am sorry I was not here when you were born, but I am here now. I am here, and I love you more than I knew was possible." Mrs. Hoffman appeared in the doorway, smiling at the scene. "You can come in, Mr. Quinn. Your wife and son should be lying down, not standing in doorways." Harrison followed them inside, never taking his eyes off the baby. Over the next hours, as Olivia rested, he held Hank and talked to him in a low, constant murmur, telling his son about the world he had been born into, the family he now had, the love that surrounded him. "You are here 3 weeks early, little man. Could not wait to meet us, I suppose. Your mama did this all alone, which shows how brave and strong she is. But I am here now, and I am not going anywhere. We are going to have such adventures together, you and me and your mama. I am going to teach you everything I know." As the sun set that evening, the 3 of them lay in the bed together, Hank sleeping between his parents. Harrison could not stop touching them both, as if to reassure himself they were real. "I love you," he said to Olivia. "Thank you for this gift, for him, for everything." "I love you too," Olivia replied. "We are a family now, Harrison, a real family." They stayed in Evanston for another month, giving Olivia time to recover and Hank time to grow stronger. Harrison divided his time between caring for his wife and son, finishing up business with the cattle company and planning for their future. The spring drive had been successful, and his payment was generous. Combined with what Olivia had earned from her artwork, they had enough saved to make some improvements to the cabin. "I want to add on a proper bedroom," Harrison said one evening as they discussed plans, "and maybe expand your studio. We could use someone from town, a carpenter, help us get it done before winter. What do you think?" "I think that sounds wonderful," Olivia said, adjusting Hank in her arms. He was nursing, his tiny hand resting against her breast. "A real house, not just a cabin." "A home," Harrison corrected. "For our family." In late July, when Hank was just over a month old, they made the journey back to their valley. They had hired a wagon to carry all their supplies plus lumber for the expansion. Harrison rode beside it, his eyes constantly scanning for danger, protective of his small family in a way he had never been before fatherhood. The cabin looked exactly as they had left it, waiting patiently for their return. Over the next months, Harrison and a carpenter from Evanston named Robert Davies worked to expand the structure. They added a bedroom with a real door for privacy and doubled the size of Olivia's studio. They built a bigger barn for the horses and a chicken coop so they could have fresh eggs. Olivia balanced her time between caring for Hank and working on her art. The newspaper continued to buy her drawings, and her reputation was growing. She had even received a letter from a publisher in New York who was interested in collecting her Western sketches into a book. It was flattering and exciting, proof that she had succeeded in her original dream of capturing the real West. Hank thrived in the mountain valley, growing from a tiny infant into a chubby baby with his father's smile and his mother's curious nature. Harrison was a devoted father, coming in from work to hold his son, playing with him on a blanket on the floor, singing him songs that his own mother had sung to him. That second winter was easier than the first. The expanded cabin was more comfortable, better insulated against the cold. They had more supplies and better systems for managing them. And they had Hank, whose presence filled the long dark evenings with joy and purpose. On Christmas morning, as snow fell softly outside, they sat together by the fire. Hank, now 6 months old, sat supported on Harrison's lap, fascinated by the colored paper they had used to wrap a few simple gifts. Olivia sketched them, capturing the scene, this perfect moment of family and contentment. "Are you happy?" Harrison asked, looking up from where he was helping Hank shake a rattle. "I am happier than I ever imagined possible," Olivia replied honestly. "Sometimes I think about the life I was supposed to have in Philadelphia. The big house, the servants, the endless social obligations. And I cannot imagine it anymore. This is what I was meant for, you and Hank in this wild, beautiful place." "I feel the same," Harrison said. "I spent so many years wandering, never settling, always looking for the next horizon, but now I have found it. Home is not a place. It is you too. Wherever you are, that is where I want to be." In the spring, Harrison took on another cattle drive, but this time Olivia and Hank went with him for the first 2 weeks. It was exactly as Harrison had predicted. Miguel fussed over them constantly, making sure Olivia had the best food and Hank was wrapped warmly enough. Chuck told endless stories, delighting in having new ears to hear his old adventures. Tommy, now 21 and more confident, proved surprisingly good with babies, entertaining Hank whenever Olivia needed a break. Olivia filled sketchbook after sketchbook with drawings of the drive. Cowboys working cattle, campfires under the stars, the endless movement of the herd. When she returned to Evanston with Hank after those 2 weeks, she had enough material for months of work. The publisher in New York sent a contract for her book, offering an advance that made both Harrison and Olivia gasp. The book, titled True West, Sketches of Cowboy Life, would be published in the fall and distributed throughout the country. "You did it," Harrison said, reading the contract with pride. "You are going to show people the real West just like you wanted." "We did it," Olivia corrected. "I could not have created any of this without you, without the life we have built together." When True West was published in October of 1887, it was more successful than anyone had anticipated. The drawings were praised for their authenticity and artistry, showing the harsh realities and quiet beauties of Western life without romanticizing or sensationalizing. Newspapers across the country reviewed it favorably, and the first printing sold out within weeks. Suddenly, Olivia Wright Quinn was famous. She received letters from admirers, requests for interviews, invitations to show her work in galleries back east. The attention was flattering but also overwhelming. She had not left Philadelphia to become famous. She had left to be free. "What do you want to do?" Harrison asked as they discussed yet another letter requesting her presence in New York for an exhibition. "I will support whatever you decide. If you want to go, I will come with you. We can make it work." Olivia looked around their cabin, at Hank playing on the floor with wooden blocks Harrison had carved, at the mountains visible through the window, at the life they had built from nothing but love and determination. "I want to stay here," she said simply. "This is my home. These are my subjects. I will keep creating and sending my work out into the world, but I do not need to leave to do that. Everything I need is right here." Harrison's relief was visible. "I was hoping you would say that, though I would have gone with you if you wanted. I know you would have. That is why I love you." Over the next years, their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Harrison continued to boss cattle drives in the spring and summer, though he always made sure to be home for important moments. Olivia's career flourished as she published 2 more books and continued to sell drawings to newspapers and magazines. Hank grew from a baby into a curious, active toddler, and then into a bright boy who loved both his father's outdoor world and his mother's artistic one. In the summer of 1889, Olivia realized she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. And this time, Harrison was present for the birth, holding her hand through the long labor and being the first to hold their daughter when she arrived in March of 1890. They named her Rose Patricia, after the wild roses that bloomed in their valley each summer and after Mrs. Hoffman, who had been such a support to Olivia. Rose had her mother's auburn hair and green eyes, and from the moment she was born, she seemed to look at the world with an artist's attention to detail. Hank, now nearly 4 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, talking to her in a serious voice, explaining important things like how to tell a horse's mood by its ears and which berries were safe to eat. "She is ours to protect," he told his parents solemnly, clearly repeating something Harrison had told him. "I am going to be the best big brother ever." And he was. As Rose grew, Hank appointed himself her guardian and playmate, including her in his adventures and teaching her everything he learned. The bond between them was immediate and strong, and watching them together filled Olivia and Harrison with joy. The cabin was expanded again, adding a loft where the children could sleep and giving everyone more space. Their home was modest compared to the mansion Olivia had left behind in Philadelphia, but it was filled with love and laughter and the evidence of lives well lived. Olivia's drawings covered the walls, a visual record of their family's growth. Harrison's handiwork was evident in every carefully crafted piece of furniture, every improvement to the structure. In 1891, Olivia finally received a letter from her mother. It had been 6 years since she had left Philadelphia, 6 years of silence from her family. She opened the envelope with trembling hands, prepared for condemnation or demands that she return. But the letter was different than she expected. Her mother wrote that Olivia's father had passed away the previous year, and in his final days, he had expressed regret for not supporting her choices. Her mother went on to say that she had seen copies of Olivia's books and was proud of what her daughter had accomplished, even if she still did not fully understand why Olivia had needed to leave. "I see now that you were right to follow your heart," her mother wrote. "You have built a life of meaning and purpose, and you seem truly happy in your letters. Perhaps I should have listened more and judged less. If you would permit it, I would like to visit someday. I should like to meet my son-in-law and my grandchildren. I understand if you say no, but I hope you will consider it." Olivia cried over that letter, grieving for her father and the reconciliation that would never happen, but grateful that her mother had finally reached out. After discussing it with Harrison, she wrote back with an invitation for her mother to visit the following summer. Margaret Wright arrived in Evanston in July of 1892, looking older and more fragile than Olivia remembered. The reunion was emotional, both women crying as they embraced. But the real magic happened when Margaret met her grandchildren. Hank, now 6, greeted his grandmother with solemn courtesy, bowing slightly as Harrison had taught him. Rose, at 2, was less formal, toddling up to Margaret and offering her a somewhat crushed wildflower with a beaming smile. Margaret sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face, and pulled both children into her arms. "They are beautiful," she told Olivia, "and so clearly loved. You have done well, my dear, better than I ever imagined." Margaret stayed for 2 weeks, and by the end she had won over everyone, even Harrison, who had been prepared to dislike the woman who had hurt his wife. She was different away from Philadelphia society, more relaxed, more herself. She helped with the children, learned to cook over the wood stove, and even tried her hand at sketching under Olivia's instruction. "I understand now why you left," Margaret said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children played nearby and Harrison worked in the barn. "This is real life. What we had in Philadelphia, all those rules and expectations, that was just a performance. This is what living actually means." "I am glad you understand," Olivia said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you or father. I just could not breathe in that world. I know. And I am sorry it took me so long to accept that." Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. "But I am accepting it now. You made the right choice, Olivia, for you and for this beautiful family you have created." When Margaret returned to Philadelphia, she promised to visit again and to write regularly. True to her word, letters began arriving every few weeks, filled with news from back east but also questions about the West and genuine interest in Olivia's life. The reconciliation was not complete. Too many years and too much hurt stood between them, but it was a beginning, and that was enough. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the steady growth of their children. Hank grew tall and strong, showing his father's natural skill with horses and cattle. He also inherited his mother's artistic eye, though his passion was for wood carving rather than drawing. By the time he was 10, he could carve intricate figures that delighted his little sister and impressed the ranch hands who sometimes visited. Rose proved to be a natural artist, showing talent even as a young child. By age 5, she was creating drawings that showed remarkable observation and skill. Olivia taught her the basics, but Rose had an instinct for composition and light that could not be taught, only nurtured. Harrison joked that they would have another famous artist in the family soon enough. In the spring of 1895, Harrison was offered a position as foreman for the Diamond Creek Cattle Company's entire Wyoming operation. It meant better pay and less time away from home, as he would be managing other trail bosses rather than leading drives himself. After discussing it with Olivia, he accepted. The promotion brought changes. They could afford more improvements to their home, better supplies, even some luxuries they had never considered before. But more importantly, it meant Harrison was home almost every night, there for family dinners and bedtime stories, present for all the small moments that made up their life together. On their 10th wedding anniversary in September of 1895, Harrison surprised Olivia by recreating their first evening together. He took her out to a ridge similar to the one where they had first kissed, while Margaret, who had come for another visit, watched the children. They sat together as the sun set, and Olivia sketched the scene just as she had done a decade earlier. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked, watching her work. "Giving up your freedom for this life with me?" Olivia set down her charcoal and took his hand. "Harrison Quinn, you gave me freedom. You gave me the space to be myself, to pursue my art, to live authentically. I was never freer than when I chose you." "I love you," he said simply. "More now than even on the day we married. I did not know it was possible to love someone more as time passed, but you prove it to me every day." "I love you too. You are still part of my picture, Harrison. You always will be." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the mountains, the same mountains that had witnessed the beginning of their story 10 years earlier. And when they rode home in the gathering darkness, it was to a house filled with light and love and the sound of their children's laughter. The years continued to unfold in this peaceful way. There were challenges, of course. Harsh winters and dry summers, sickness that had to be nursed through, financial worries when cattle prices dropped. But they faced everything together, their love only growing stronger through shared struggle and shared joy. Hank grew into a fine young man, eventually taking a job with the cattle company himself and proving as skilled as his father. At 20, he married a local girl named Sarah, and they built a small house just a mile from Harrison and Olivia's expanded homestead. The first grandchild, a boy they named Harrison after his grandfather, arrived in 1906, making Harrison and Olivia grandparents in their 40s. Rose followed her mother's artistic path, though she expanded into painting as well as drawing. Her work began to sell when she was just 16, and by 20, she had her first exhibition in Cheyenne. She eventually married a photographer named Daniel, and together they documented the changing West, her paintings and his photographs creating a visual record of a way of life that was slowly disappearing. Margaret Wright passed away peacefully in 1908, in her sleep at Olivia and Harrison's home during what had become an annual summer visit. She was laid to rest in the Evanston Cemetery, and at her request, one of Olivia's drawings of the mountain valley was placed in her coffin. In her final years, she had found peace and purpose helping with her grandchildren and later her great-grandchildren, finally understanding that love mattered more than social standing. Mrs. Hoffman lived to the impressive age of 87, passing in 1910. She had become like family to Olivia and Harrison, her boarding house a second home for years. Her funeral was well attended, the church packed with people whose lives she had touched. Olivia spoke at the service, honoring the woman who had been the first to welcome her to Evanston and who had supported her through so much. Harrison and Olivia grew older together gracefully. His hair turned silver, and her hands became gnarled with arthritis that made drawing difficult, but their love never dimmed. They still rode out to watch the sunsets when weather permitted, still shared stories by the fire in the evenings, still reached for each other in the night with the easy familiarity of decades together. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1925, their family gathered for a celebration at the homestead. Hank and Sarah were there with their 4 children, all grown now with families of their own. Rose and Daniel came from Denver with their 3 children. The house and surrounding grounds were filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, 3 generations of family that had sprung from that chance meeting on a boulder so many years ago. Harrison stood to make a toast, his voice still strong despite his 70 years. 40 years ago, I was just a cowboy riding home after a long day. I saw a beautiful woman sitting alone, sketching the sunset, and something made me stop. Best decision I ever made in my life. Olivia, you have given me everything. Love, family, purpose, and home. You are still the most beautiful sunset I have ever seen. Here is to 40 more years. We will be 90 before 40 more years are up, Olivia pointed out, laughing. But I will take whatever time we have got. I love you, Harrison Quinn. They kissed to the applause and laughter of their assembled family, and Olivia felt that same flutter in her chest that she had felt when she was 22 and he had first sat down beside her. Some things never changed, and that was one of them. Later that evening, when the party had wound down and the younger children were being put to bed in various rooms throughout the expanded house, Olivia and Harrison walked out to the ridge. The same ridge where he had first taken her, where he had first kissed her, where they had come so many times over the years to mark important moments. The sunset was spectacular, as if the sky itself was celebrating with them. Oranges and pinks and purples painted the clouds, and the mountains stood dark against the brilliant display. Olivia still carried a small sketchbook everywhere, and she pulled it out now, her arthritic fingers gripping the pencil with determination. You are going to draw it even now? Harrison asked affectionately. Always, Olivia replied. This view never gets old, and neither do you sitting beside me. Harrison settled onto the ground next to her, his body not as flexible as it once was but still strong. I am an old man now, Olivia. Gray hair, creaky joints, the works. You are distinguished, she corrected. And still the handsomest man I know. You are biased, completely. But that does not make it untrue. They sat in comfortable silence as she sketched, the familiar scritch of charcoal on paper the soundtrack to so many of their shared moments. When she finished, she held up the drawing to show him. The sunset, the mountains, and in the foreground the 2 of them sitting together, his arm around her shoulders, her head leaning against his. Just like the first one, Harrison observed. Except we are older. And richer, Olivia added. Not in money, though we have done well enough, but in everything that matters. We are so rich in everything that matters, Harrison. Yes, he agreed simply. We are. As the sun set completely and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they stayed on the ridge, wrapped in each other's arms and in the knowledge of a life well lived. They had taken a chance on love when it made no logical sense, when they had known each other only days. But that impulsive choice had led to 40 years of joy, struggle, growth, and unshakable partnership. When they finally rose to walk back to the house filled with their family, Harrison took Olivia's hand, and she was struck by how natural it still felt, how right. His hand in hers had been the first familiar thing in a strange new world, and it remained her anchor 4 decades later. Thank you, she said as they walked slowly through the twilight. For what? For sitting beside me that first day, for becoming part of my picture, for everything. Harrison stopped and turned to face her, his weathered face gentle in the starlight. Thank you for letting me stay, for choosing me, choosing this life every single day. You made me a better man than I ever would have been alone. We made each other better, Olivia said. That is what love does. They continued walking. And when they reached the house, light spilled from every window, and they could hear the voices of their family inside, talking and laughing, living the lives that Olivia and Harrison had made possible by loving each other so completely. Harrison Quinn and Olivia Wright Quinn lived several more years in their beloved valley, surrounded by family and the land they had made into home. They died within months of each other in 1929, he in June and she in August, as if neither could bear to be apart from the other for long. They were buried side by side in the Evanston Cemetery, their shared headstone simple, together in life, together in eternity. But their legacy lived on. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons they had taught about love, courage, and following your heart. The homestead remained in the family, passed down through the generations. And Olivia's artwork, particularly those early sketches of a cowboy who had sat beside her and become part of her picture, became treasured family heirlooms, reminders of where it all began. Years later, when great-great-grandchildren asked about the old sketches hanging on the walls, about the couple in the photographs looking so happy despite their hard life, they were told the story. About a woman who left everything to be free, about a cowboy who stopped to watch a sunset, about a love that defied logic but created something beautiful and lasting. And those descendants understood that they existed because two people had been brave enough to choose love over caution, partnership over propriety, and a hard life filled with meaning over an easy life of emptiness. The Wyoming mountains still stood, watching over the valley where the Quinn family had made their home. The sunsets still painted the sky in impossible colors. And if you knew where to look on a certain boulder overlooking it all, you could almost see them still. A woman with her sketchbook and a man beside her, together as they had always been, part of the same beautiful picture.